I'm losing my headband here. I can feel it just slowly sliding back off of my head. There we go. All right, Sunday we were looking at this passage in Luke 5, a really interesting story where these friends bring their friend who needs healing to Jesus, but they can't get to Jesus, so they go up on the roof, they remove the roof tiles, and they lower him in right in front of Jesus to be healed. Really interesting story, really fun story, really challenging story for those of us like me who are able-bodied and don't give much thought to accessing physical space. This idea that hospitality is more than just welcoming people into our spaces. Hospitality is actually working to ensure that others are welcome into the spaces that we have access to. Really challenging for us to think about how we extend hospitality to those around us. But there's also something interesting going on here in the chapter Luke 5, because in it, Jesus meets and addresses two different men who are both coming to him for healing. But he deals with them in two very different ways, and the interaction of these two stories, I think, gives us a really interesting window into how Jesus imagines healing, and then more importantly, how Jesus imagines community. So, the start of the chapter, Jesus is found by this man who is covered with leprosy. This man tracks him down, and he comes to him and he asks for healing. And Jesus immediately obliges. He touches the man, he heals the man, and then he says to him, "Don't tell anyone about this. Instead, go to the priests, do the sacrifices that they command for your healing, and regain your place in community." One-on-one with this interaction with this man who needs healing, Jesus' concern is primarily that he recapture his place in community around him. And yet, in the very next story, what we have is this encounter where these friends bring their friend, who's paralyzed, to Jesus. They lower him in front of Jesus, and immediately in front of an audience of religious leaders, in front of a crowd that's watching, Jesus' first response is to say, "You are forgiven." And I'm intrigued by this, that one-on-one, Jesus' first response is to respond to the need of this man in front of him, to heal his physical body, and then immediately tell him to go, jump to the hoops, regain your place in community. But with an audience, with a group of religious people watching, Jesus' first response to say is, "Before anything else, I restore you fully to community. I forgive you. I recognize, I claim, I declare right now in front of this audience that no longer will religion be used as an excuse to exclude you based on your difference." Then, of course, when people get upset and they say, "Well, you can't do that, you can't say them. You have no right to restore him to us," Jesus says, "Okay, well, what's harder? To say you're restored to community, you're forgiven, you're welcome, or to say, get up and walk, and just so that you know who I am and what I'm about, I tell you, take your mat and head home to those who need you." Really interesting moment here, something that I would call performative forgiveness. See, there are moments where Jesus interacts with people and he forgives them. He welcomes them back into right relationship with the divine. And then there are moments like this that seem to be designed not so much for the person at the center of the story, but for the audience that is watching. This is forgiveness that is meant to heal both the individual, but more importantly, to heal the community, to forgive the community, to help the community become everything that it has lost sight of. Jesus is saying something here, not to the man who wants to be healed, but to the community that needs to be healed. The community that has begun to rely on exclusion, on pushing people aside, on using difference to decide who is in and out. Jesus is using this moment as a teaching moment to heal all of us. As I said on Sunday, that it seems to be that the primary healing the divine is interested in enacting among us is the healing of community that restores us to each other. This is Jesus' real concern here, that we learn how to be together, how to welcome each other, how to see each other, and how to embrace each other, even in the midst of our suffering at times. And this is really fascinating, that there are moments of forgiveness that are performative. They teach us, they heal us, they lead us into new directions because we're able to see them. And the question here is how is God forgiving you right now? Is it all about your personal connection to the divine, the ways that you need to be restored and welcomed, brought back into right relationship through your repentance and your encounter with Jesus? Or are there moments where God is speaking forgiveness to you that are meant to orient you toward the community around you, that are meant to remind you that you are meant to embrace and welcome all those near you, even as you are forgiven? And this is something that I think we miss out on sometimes as Protestants when we don't practice the sacrament of confession. See, confession is never about us getting to decide when to dole out or when to hold back God's forgiveness. Confession is about the fact that we get to speak God's forgiveness to each other. We perform it for each other. We remind us of the forgiveness of God given to us. And in that moment, we heal both the person who needs to have that forgiveness spoken to them, but in a sense, we also heal ourselves because we remind ourselves of the forgiveness of God that makes us forgiving people. And there might be moments in your life right now where you have forgiven someone, but you've not performed it. You haven't spoken it to them. You haven't declared it in the world so that they know it. And maybe you say to yourself, no, they already know. We're good. It's okay. But when you speak that to them, when you say you are forgiven, what you do is you restore relationship in a way that heals everyone there. It heals not only you, not only the person that's hurt you, but it heals the community that is watching. This is what we do as church. We speak the goodness, the forgiveness of God to the world. Not because we ever get to give it out or hold it back, but because when we do that, we perform the goodness of God in the world. We remind people of the goodness of God in the world. We create the community that embodies the goodness of God in the world. And this is what Jesus is doing here in this moment. Yes, of course he forgives this man. Of course he wants to welcome this man. But by performing that publicly, in front of the religious leaders, in front of an audience that has used religion to exclude this man for far too long, he actually begins to heal all of us in that moment. And that is an incredibly beautiful thing. So may you speak forgiveness to those who need it. And as you do that, may it begin to heal you, to heal the community, to restore you to the right relationships you were always intended to have with all those who cross your path.